Hi, everybody, and thanks for tuning in to #SportsConf 2015. My name is Matthew Cerrone. I'm the Digital Content Director for SportsNet New York, as well as the lead writer and creator of MetsBlog.com. My thing is basically finding content opportunities that reach sports fans, so I'm thrilled to be moderating this panel today because I have a ton of questions for the following guys, who I consider really to be brilliant in the world of mobile technology. So let's start the introductions. First off is Jamie Mottram. He's the content director for USA Today Sports. John Turner, who is the editorial director for Sporting News Media. Joe Ross, the VP of content for theScore, which is an awesome app. And Ben Lyons, the chief content officer for the Players Tribune. And I'd like to first start with Jamie, and the rest of you feel free to respond, disagree, add on where you feel it's necessary. But it's really a simple question, and I'd love all of you to kind of weigh in at some point. In your view, what makes for good mobile content? Basically, what are sports fans looking for on mobile?
Well, good content, period, makes for good mobile content, but I think it's also important to kind of get out of the way of the story, the video, whatever it is people are there for. Give them a clean, uncluttered, fast experience because they don't have time to dick around. They're there to get what they want and, in most cases, move on. So tell the great story and get out of the way.
Excellent. So anybody want to add in? I mean, that's pretty clear cut.
Well, I think we're all fans here of sports, and so we know it when we see it as a consumer. So we would like to think that we know it when we put it out there as a content creator. You know when you're posting something, whether it's through social media or whatever your day job is in this hangout, that when you have that nugget and you're sitting there and it's on your thumb and you can feel it, and you say, "Oh shit, this is gonna kill!" Like you know it as a fan because it's the stuff you want to see, and then as a content provider, it's the stuff you really want to create. It's the stuff that would make the 11-year-old version of yourself very proud, I think, is what it is.
Right.
Yeah, I think when it comes to what users are looking for on mobile, obviously they want you to keep them informed of what's going on. Nobody wants to miss out on any stories. It's kind of like keep me informed while I'm living my life sort of thing. And then there's also just the personalization aspect of it too, which doesn't really come from necessarily the content creator, but more structurally. Just because phones are so personal by nature, they're kind of like an extension of people now. I know I freak out way more if I lose my phone than if I were to lose my wallet. So having something that seems tailored to readers is extremely valuable in the mobile space.
Yeah, and I think Jamie made a good point that you want interesting content no matter what you're publishing on, no matter what platform you're publishing on. I'm hard-pressed to come up with something where you're like, yeah, we would do this in mobile, but we wouldn't do this on desktop. You just want good content. And, I think what, Joe, what you guys do at theScore is you have those push notifications behind it. You have the product behind it. So more often with mobile, with the content, we're just talking about product and how we're packaging it, less about what we're producing and how interesting it is. We all want to write shorter, smarter, and things like that, and that doesn't really change desktop versus mobile.
Well, it presents an interesting question, John, which is, and this actually I'd be curious to get your take. What is the difference between, say, writing specifically for mobile as opposed to serving up desktop content in a mobile format? Responsive design and those sorts of things. Do you think there's two different audiences? I have a good friend who works for Circa, and we talk all the time about how they think in terms of producing specifically for mobile, and we talk about what that means. I'm curious what your take is, and obviously with theScore, what happens there.
Yeah, I think Circa is actually a really good example of a great product that has the content that makes sense for that container.
Right.
For those of you who've not used Circa, it's just a really smart, digestible way to move through news. Now, if you were writing that content for online, or for desktop, say, I think it should be the same content. I think that they're still very smart about how they write it. They're very concise, and they're conscious of the reader's time. So that's just another instance of almost, sports metaphor.
Joe probably would attest to this. I mean, it probably also depends too on the point of what you're trying to relay, and what the goal of that that communication is. I mean, in terms of theScore, Joe, how does that work for you guys?
Well, I mean, there's definitely a user expectation on mobile where people are expecting to follow a story as it develops in real time. that can be really overwhelming if you're just using Twitter or social media, so that there is that mentality of you're kind of there to distill all of that information as it's coming in, finding the most relevant facts, most accurate facts, and then packaging that up to your readers, and then having the readers know that you're going to be there on that story all the time and be continuously updating that as it develops. So it's really, I think it's more of just a mentality thing. I mean, for us, we also have the mentality that we've got to be bringing the news to our readers. We can't just have readers come to us for news, which is great, but there's also that extra element as well, with push notifications and people trying to really battle for that screen. So I think overall there's the big difference is, I mean, obviously digital people are looking for real-time stuff, but there is definitely an expectation with your phone. It's a right-now device. People want what's happening at this moment, and they expect to follow that story as it develops.
Because there's such that sort of real-time element, obviously, on mobile, Ben, when it comes to the Players Tribune, which obviously is a little bit more long-form, so to speak, and you guys dig into, it's a little more thoughtful. I'm going to sit down and read that. How does that, play out for you guys? Does it affect at all in terms of how you go about what you do?
Well, we're still figuring it out. We, as much as we have some big heavy hitters behind us, we do like to remind ourselves that we are a startup and have only been around for a few months or weeks even. And I think that the element of being a fan and on the mobile experience is, if I'm a huge baseball fan and I read a great article that Andrew McCutcheon wrote for us, I'm going to feel the urge to send that to my uncle who's a big baseball fan, and he's going to be on the train to work and he's going to receive that and maybe read that in that kind of setting. So I think there's you're kind of building in on fan bases, building off of fan bases for these different athletes, for these different sports. Something that we really like with our site and our platform is that it's a community. So if you're a huge baseball fan and maybe you don't know much about the NBA, but you do read an interesting article or you see a cool piece of video from Kobe, then maybe you'll share that with your friend who is a huge NBA fan. So I think it's just tapping into that community. And we're on these things the most out of any screen in our lives, whether it's a computer, television screen, movie screen. This is the one that people spend the most amount of hours looking at every day. So you're really creating for this first, and then everything else kind of trickles off of that.
Yeah, and I'd also just like to add that we don't produce anything with desktop in mind. Even our websites, even though desktop consumption is still 40% or 30% or whatever for any given property that we have, we still are thinking about the mobile experience first. With For the Win, about 100% of the content production is happening on desktop, but about 70-80% is happening on mobile. So when our writers and our editors are publishing, they're looking at mobile previews, so they have an idea of what it's going to look like on that phone versus what it's going to look like on the desktop that they're actually working on.
I do also think as well with the Players Tribune, I mean, there still is a job there for people to read longer content on their phones. There's the long bus ride, the long train ride, sitting at the waiting room in the doctor's office. There's still that need, I think, where it's not necessarily just about short content. I think there's long form and there's short form that can work. You really just need to kind of pick what job you're doing and kind of what you stand for, and then make sure that you're doing that better than anyone else, so that when it comes time to pull out your phone, you're a place that users are going to.
I think it comes down to purpose a lot of times too. So I know for us at SNY, one of my big obsessions is really trying to find, think about the purpose behind why people are logging onto the site in any given moment. So we deal in a lot of news. So whether it's news or rumor on other sources, other places, and I know that those people are getting that real-time information on Twitter. So to try and combat that, in terms of our editorial on the website, is kind of a waste of time. So it's like, what can we do? What's the purpose of our site in that given moment? And trying to attack it that way. And I suppose it's probably a similar thing for theScore, which is, you're trying to sort of break down and recap stories and repackage them with all different kinds of media. So how you go about it is obviously going to be different than, say, how the Players Tribune goes about, their purpose, which is going to be sort of sit down and, read this sort of long, longer thing and really dive into the psyche of that particular player's experience. So I guess for me at least, it always comes back to kind of what the goal is at that given moment of what we're trying to produce. I'm wondering if you guys think of it in a similar way.
Well, I'll go.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say that I think we also kind of assume that the audience is on Twitter, and that we need to somehow do something different or go above and beyond the experience that's being provided on Twitter. But the fact of the matter is not everybody's on Twitter. Even the people that are on Twitter aren't always on Twitter. So yeah, sure, if you are looking at your Twitter app, you're on TweetDeck tonight during the UNC Duke game, and you see that it's close and late and the game is awesome, well, that's great. Everybody knows that who's already in the Twitter experience. But for the other 90% of the people out there, they don't know. So that's when alerts and notifications come in, whether it's from the SCORE or the USA Today Sports app or Sporting News or whoever, to say, hey, something awesome is happening. Get your ass in front of a TV.
Cool. So, talking in terms of, we're talking a lot of editorial. And as far as video goes, Jamie, with you guys, I know you're starting to do more video. You sent my buddy Ted out to the dog show thing, which was excellent. If anybody hasn't seen it, they got to check it out. OG Tedberg out at the dog show thing is fantastic. But how has video sort of changed your approach? Do you look at video from the desktop era versus mobile any differently, or sort of is it really the same thing? Is it just a different type of content type?
Well, I mean, if you notice, we sent one of our writers, Ted Berg, to the dog show for a day or two and produced a lot of video out of that, but none of the videos were more than two minutes long. Some were even briefer than that. Some were chopped up into kind of like list format, so they're easy to kind of follow along and consume. So we produced those with that phone experience in mind. We weren't thinking about people who were kind of leaning back, looking at their tablet or at work, taking a break. We were thinking about people who were riding the train, stuck in traffic, waiting in line, and trying to produce really sharp, concise video that could be watched and enjoyed in that environment.
The other thing too, it was kind of cool, is that you were able to kind of, and I haven't talked to him about it, but get a lot of other things out of it too. So there's not just the video shoot. There's all these other pieces. I know for us, We'll do an interview and it's a podcast. It's a a Q&A. It's a text. It's news pieces. It's all these things that come out of these individual experiences. And some of them are, as far as I'm concerned, something that's going to be a little shorter that we could sort of dish out. That I know is going to show up just in that one panel on that one page on their mobile screen as opposed to something else. I mean, I guess you can kind of extrapolate from each one too. So Ben, you guys also are, I know that you do a lot of other content as well. The photo galleries and things are terrific too. In the field, real time, do you do anything? Does that sort of play into maybe how you look at a mobile experience? Again, because it does sort of, I think a mobile a lot more real time, more immediate. Does that impact you guys at all?
We're not trying to provide scores in real time. We're not trying to provide stats. We're trying to provide maybe some reaction after that UNC North Carolina, the Duke game. If we get Rick Fox and Jay Billis or someone to kind of talk about it afterwards, former players. But for us in our video stuff, it's like, for example, the thing we did with Kobe Bryant, where he took us into the doctor's office when he found out his rotator cuff was torn. That's the type of mobile content. It's a minute and a half, and the greatest player of a generation finds out his season's over. And that's like an experience that traditional media just can't provide and hasn't really. So to have that type of access, obviously we rely on the players to provide that. And it's about getting the guys more comfortable with taking the fans into those places. So, that's one that we're really proud of, and we're starting to try to roll out more videos as we announced this weekend with a partnership with AOL. So yeah, those are the types of things that we want to do. Is not so much reacting to games as they're happening, because our content creators are playing the games. They're not the guys sitting at home or in the stands or in the press box. They're the ones on the field. So we have to wait for them to be done doing their day job before they can really create content for us.
Sure. There's also the trend of basically launching standalone applications. And so I'm wondering, maybe John, if you want to talk a little bit about or discuss sort of that idea that we've got this one environment where we do one thing, and now we're going to launch this other product that is really sort of specific to this experience. Any thoughts on sort of just that general trend?
Yeah, I mean, I think Joe is going to be the best guy to talk about it for sure, because what they do is awesome. At Sporting News, we're kind of in between two worlds, right?
And that's how I feel too with what we do. That's why I'm curious, kind of where your head's at.
We're stuck, we're stuck right in between kind of the app world and the responsive world, which is we're a 129-year-old startup sprinting toward mobile relevancy. So we know where we want to be, and we wrestle with that all the time. But as far as delivering the content, we recognize that has some definite advantages that they've touched on, which is, as far as mobile content goes, that's push notifications, getting that out to people, getting a list of folks who are interested in you, and you have the information on them, and you can deliver custom content to them, which again, theScore does very, very, very well. But it's not a it's not a content. There is no such thing as programming for desktop content. You just program content now, and since mobile is how it's consumed, that's the content that we're delivering. So really, for us, it's just a matter of picking the container with a responsive versus app environment, which we're in limbo.
Joe, maybe you want to talk about the esports, because that kind of actually is really right along the lines of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, esports is, for people that don't know, is competitive video game playing essentially, and that was a spot where we noticed there really wasn't any mobile-focused solutions to the rabid consumption habits of the fans of esports. So we got into that space and launched an app on February 2nd. And for us, we're only focused on the mobile screen, so we're always looking for those opportunities. And the response so far has been great. And again, a lot of it comes to the not only the content, but also the nature of utility of phones, where we've got box scores for the games and all that information that wasn't necessarily available in that type of format, so easy to consume on mobile.
So we haven't. Jamie, do you want to add anything? Because obviously you guys have the USA Today Sports app that just came in, and Sports PSA on Twitter. I always thought it was kind of an awesome concept, and those sorts of projects and whatnot. So do anything you want to kind of weigh in terms of building these sort of separate entities?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, we tested Sports PSA as a Twitter account for the past year and a half, and the whole notion was we were going to let you know when something really cool was happening in sports, so you could tune in and watch it before it happened, as opposed to tuning in after the fact or finding out later on after you'd already missed it. And we had to test that as a Twitter account because you could turn alerts on for individual Twitter accounts, but we didn't. You couldn't turn alerts on for our site, and we didn't have an app. So now that we do with the USA Today Sports app that launched 6 days ago, you can turn on alerts for must-see games. And you're not going to get, you might not get an alert for 3 days. But tonight, if UNC Duke is close and late, you're going to get an alert on your phone to tell you to turn it on. It's going to tell you what channel it's on. It's going to tell you the exact score and game situation. So that's something we couldn't do with our suite of digital products before. But now we can, now that we have an app. And thank God, too, because if we didn't have alerts and notifications, we'd be losing in the mobile race.
So what's interesting to me about that is that's not necessarily, if at all, a content play, right? It's more of a customer service thing, which a lot of these these other applications are to an extent. Really, it all is at the end of the day, but it's really not straight up content. But it's still something that keeps people tied to the brand. It keeps people in the environment. I'm sorry, go on.
Well, I will say it doesn't really matter, because it's cool shit, and it's
right.
hand-powered. It's our editors who are watching everything and recommending something to you to watch. So to me, it's an editorial function, and it's a good experience. So whether it's content or not, it's still in the realm of something that we should be doing.
Well, and the next step is going to be, I would think you've got an opportunity there where you've got a pipeline into that sort of immediate moment. You can kind of connect people to things that you're talking about and other sort of real-time content that you're producing too, because that could be down the road. How do you, I guess the other thing is, again, with all these other things, there's obviously the element of monetization. People are trying to make money with some of these things. And so is there a difference between monetizing mobile content, these sorts of apps? If you've got a standalone app that might pull from your desktop environment and other places where advertisers are looking to spend, it changes the whole game. So how does that, how does this impact, the bottom line basically in terms of these standalone things, or even just your mobile presence in general?
Well, I'll just say quickly, where the audience goes is where the advertiser will follow. So the audience is clearly going to the space.
Sometimes, though.
It takes time. I mean, there's lag to it, but we're already seeing it. I mean, we're seeing a lot of big sponsors step in with a number of our mobile experiences. Specifically like the sports app or with For the Win, a lot of broadcasters are hoping to drive tune-in. So if they can attach their brand messaging, their broadcast information to trending content, trending information, then that's going to help them deliver a broadcast audience as well.
One thing I will say about ads in the mobile space is I think users are far more sensitive to any ad they may deem annoying or detracting from their experience than they are in desktop, again, because of the smaller screen. And again, I think it's because of the personal nature of phones as well. People kind of look at that as, this is my space. So it's definitely, when you have your ad units, you have to make sure that there's nothing that's actually driving people away from your site entirely. Because again, I find that there is a high sensitivity to anything that users deem annoying when they check your stuff.
Yeah, we're always getting inundated. I'm sure you all are to a certain extent. With wanting to do native ads and things in the news feed, in our sponsored posts, things like that. Which obviously, I think of Quartz, they do a terrific job with it, and people that have sort of set that trend, and it makes it easy to the extent that it doesn't really change anything. We're doing what we're doing, and there's advertising and sponsorships and stuff that are wrapped around it, and it is what it is. It doesn't matter if it's on desktop or mobile or in an app or whatever. It is what it is. So for us, it's pretty streamlined. But for some of these other things, there's other inventory, there's other opportunities that come along with some of these apps. So I'm wondering if maybe you guys can talk a little bit of maybe some of the other opportunities that come along with having a standalone application or different things that kind of can be baked into it, whether it's ads through push and whatnot, things maybe that you don't want to take part in because, like you said, they're annoying, or stuff that there's a demand for that maybe you struggle with incorporating. Where does that sort of that sit in terms of the inventory that you're working with? And I don't know who's best to kind of talk about that, because
I can tell you. I can tell you for us, at Sporting News, we are, we're really trying to walk that very thin line between a good experience for the user and a worthwhile experience for the advertiser. We're trying to build new inventory because obviously those 4mm by 10mm banners on mobile aren't cutting it for anybody. But I think with an app, at least, what you have is you have the opportunity to get really personalized, and you have the opportunity to push notifications to folks that are tailored, that they might actually be interested in, and kind of marry up potential sponsors, as opposed to just blasting out an ad about Macy's or something to the masses, which is what we're all trying to do in mobile in some ways, but trying to do it creatively. And we launched a new dynamic ad platform for mobile in December. That's working for us a little bit, and we're just trying to find ways to fit worthwhile advertising right here in a way that doesn't piss people off.
Well, that helps.
Yeah, I know something for us is that we don't want to be the place that disguises content and it's really an ad for sneakers, or it's an ad for Powerade, or we're going to have partnerships with brands that'll help create content, but it doesn't have to come across like it's a commercial. You can watch Kevin Durant commercials on TV. You don't need to come to our site for that. But we'll partner with some of the brands that these guys have relationships with to kind of create and fuel cool content, but we don't want it to read like it's a Nike manifesto or something like that. And you guys are all working at these established brands that are leaders in sports news and sports content for, I don't know, some of up to 100 years. So I think for us, in terms of whether it's in the mobile space or coming up with an app, it's just about planting our flag in the sand and getting a seat at the table. We're so new on the scene that to compete with a USA Today Sports or something is not really what we're trying to do. We're just trying to be included at the dinner. So I think for us, it's more about when you're talking about all these apps and mobile and all this stuff, it's just about establishing a voice and a presence in the marketplace, and then that's appealing to advertisers ultimately.
It's the other thing that I'm interested in, because it's, and I do feel like we are at SNY a little bit late to the game because we've had the luxury of being able to continue to really rely on a desktop audience. It's still, we're just starting to see that tipping point, which is, we kind of marvel at, just because, it's years later. And so we still struggle a little bit with this idea that we're sending people to these different, or if we do a mobile app, if you're in that space, you're pulling people from this other environment. Inversely, you're sharing so much content and you're doing so many things. How do you get people to sort of stay in those environments once they've shared that piece of information, whether it's for purposes of time spent or whatever it is you're trying to serve up or facilitate? Does that even matter? And I know Jamie kind of has an interesting perspective on this because it's the whole genesis of For the Win. But for somebody like the Sporting News, I mean, and even Players Tribune, where do you kind of come down on? I'm sending people, they're coming for this one particular thing. How do I keep them on this site? Does it even matter?
Well, for us, I mean, we try not to be so needy. Like if you want to leave, that's cool. Thank you for coming by. We hope we told you a great story and you enjoyed yourself. And next time you see one of our stories in your newsfeed or in your timeline or somebody texted it to you or whatever, you will be happy to click on that link because you're going to get told another great story. We're trying to use social platforms and mobile consumption as the two primary drivers of our audience behavior. Those are the two behaviors that make everything we do successful to the extent that it is successful. And if you're going to compete that way, if you're going to compete on social, you have to not mind so much when people come in for a little bit and then go right back where they came from.
Yeah, that's great points there from Jamie. I mean, you really have to focus on delivering that repeated quality experience, and people will come back to you. And for us, it's even the same thing with our notifications. I mean, if we send out a push notification that CC Sabathia has gone on the 15-day DL with an elbow injury, and that's really all that Yankee fan who got that news needs to know, that's cool. If they don't swipe through, that's fine. Like, we're not going to always tease them in with "you'll never guess who the Yankees put on the DL" as a push notification so that they have to swipe through and check what the content is. It's all about building sort of a long-term relationship with the reader so that they know, like Jamie said, when they click through on your stuff, they're going to get a good experience and they will come back as long as you deliver that.
Yeah,
and,
Joe,
and build off of that, it's like Joe said, if the news breaks that CC's down with a 15-day, on the DL with his elbow, the idea is, okay, maybe you get that information from the score, you got that news, now you go over to the Players Tribune and CC is showing you how he's rehabbing his elbow. And then when he's back on the mound and the Yankees are playing the Red Sox, you're going to find out that it's tied in the 6th inning from USA Today. Like, it all kind of pushes towards each other in a real way in the news cycle.
Yeah, and for us, stickiness within our app is great. Outside of the app, just the general mobile web, especially the traffic coming from Facebook and Twitter, like you guys see, I'm sure, is not sticky at all, and that's okay. We don't want to junk up our mobile feed with a bunch of garbage to try and clickbait people in. Like Jamie said, we want to come in, have a good time, and go out. Facebook says 1 in every 4 clicks on the internet is to their site. We can't compete with that. We're not going to pretend as though people are going to get into the Sporting News app or get into the Sporting News mobile site and click there 11 times. It's just not going to happen. So as long as we can keep showing people that we're consistently doing things that they should click out of there, then that's fine. I'd rather not garbage it up for them. Well,
so that brings up the topic of Facebook, which is something that I think everybody kind of talks about, whether it's how to leverage that traffic, how do you sort of take advantage of those links. They're always changing their game, so one of the easy questions is it foolish to depend so heavily on a source like that, which speaks to, I think, a lot of what we ultimately want to do, which is sort of produce really good content wherever it might be, and hope that stands on its own. But at the same time, they do swallow up, as you just noted, a ton of those mouse clicks. So, what does that mean to you guys? And do you think, do you rely on them? Are you mindful of sort of what they're doing, or is at the end of the day that not what's most important? And so, if they change, they change. If they don't, they don't. How do they factor into your sort of individual strategies?
I mean, we just pay them bucket loads of cash to make sure that we get good placement.
There you go.
So I know you guys do the same thing. It's one of those. This past year was a crazy year of Facebook traffic growth, and everybody should be mindful of where their traffic is coming from and diversifying those things. But Matthew, you're exactly right. It's one of those that if they change the formula tomorrow, we have to be prepared for that. We can't allow ourselves to stand on one leg. So, but I'd be interested to hear what some of you other guys are seeing with that too.
I'll say Facebook's a powerful traffic driver, but so is Google. And maybe Google is less significant as a traffic source than it was 5 years ago, but it's still right there at whether it's 1 or 2 with Facebook, it's at the top of the list. So I think you have to be aware of what works on Facebook, the way that audience behaves, the way you can engage them with your storytelling, but don't put all your eggs in that basket. Diversify your portfolio of traffic sources, whether it's with Google, with Facebook, with dark social, with habitual users, app downloads, whatever it might be. You don't want to be too heavily invested in one platform or another.
I mean, for us, it's I like building off of what Jamie said. It's just another platform to try to get eyeballs. But we found that we've had the most success when we've kind of Trojan horse traditional media. When Blake Griffin writes a story about why he's not dunking anymore, and the guys on PTI sit and debate it, that gets people to check out our site. So Facebook it hasn't been something that's been part of my day-to-day, but if we have a presence there, great. But there's ways to get eyeballs through Twitter and through traditional media and just, the athletes' social reach themselves. And I don't know, I mean, I haven't, to be honest, like Facebook hasn't really been a part of my personal day-to-day. We're doing stuff on radio and podcasts and all types of other places.
One thing I will say about Facebook is I think the good news about every time they change their algorithm, so to speak, it seems to be to get better quality content within people's news feeds. So as long as you're continuing to, like we kind of talked about in the last question, focusing on delivering a good experience anytime somebody clicks off a link, it seems like Facebook's constantly working to make sure that that stuff is what users see. But like everybody said, you can't focus entirely on Facebook's engine of growth. I mean, you can't ignore it either, obviously, because you can't claim to be a player in mobile content and ignore Facebook. But you have to also take care of your site, your app, make it the best possible experience, and make sure that there's still a place for it on people's phones.
I can add one more point about Facebook. I think a big trend this year, and something we all have to figure out, is the time is coming where more and more content is going to be published to Facebook versus published to our own domains, our own applications, and then shared or then republished to Facebook, hoping that people will come to us. We're going to have to make that decision. How much content do we want to publish to Facebook? How much do we want to let users stay on that platform to read our stories, watch our videos, etc.? We've already seen that with Snapchat. A bunch of brands are now publishing tons of content that only exists within Snapchat, and all of that usage leads to zero traffic on their own domains. It's a big intersection that we're all approaching pretty quickly.
I think it speaks to the power of brand building, basically. I mean, I've always made it with Metsblog for 11 years, my goal always is, it's very simple, which is when a news story breaks or something happens, I want people to sort of instinctively think, what does Metsblog think? What does Matt think? And I want them to wake up with that. So at the end of the day, if we're using Twitter or Snapchat or anything to sort of disseminate photos or different video, or use Facebook to upload video specifically, especially right now, at the end of the day, I want it to continue to help bake in this idea that Metsblog has this other element of content, this other stuff that people still need and want. And so far, so good. I don't know if you can hear my kids running around in the back. If you can, ignore them. My daughter's got home from school. Yeah, so that's kind of the way I look at it, is to really use these channels to help educate people about what we're doing in these other environments. But that's still a little old school, and it still works for us. We'll see how that goes. The Facebook video thing is really interesting. It's also complete bullshit to an extent. As you guys know, those numbers are complete. No one knows what to make of them. So we do, we test stuff, we upload things, we see how it goes. But no, they need to provide more data on that stuff, which I'm sure they will, probably then charge for it. But we'll see how it goes. But that's kind of where the way I look at those channels. I don't know if you guys agree with that.
Well, one thing I'll say though, I mean, even though this seems like an emerging trend, us all putting a lot of content on these social platforms, we've been doing it on Twitter every day, all day long for 6 or 7 years. It's just a lot more present, and it seems to be evolving more rapidly in these other kind of emerging platforms, especially Snapchat, but also Instagram. I think theScore has a great Instagram feed, and it's all happening on Instagram. It's not happening on theScore or wherever, and that's not to say that's misguided, but that's just the reality.
Yeah, and especially with Facebook video right now, it's just a matter of how many chips do you want to put on the table in a pre-monetization world. We at Sporting News, we're all about video. Perform is the largest, most significant digital video rights holder in North America. That is how I get paid. How much of that are we putting into Facebook? How much time are we putting into that? Making a bet before you can make any money off of it is difficult to do, but at some point you have to do that. So we're wrestling with that ourselves. We just know we need to do it. It's just a matter of the extent that we jump in.
So the Snapchat Discover is fascinating. It's wonderfully done. It's addictive when I remember to actually launch it and look at it, but I don't think about it on a regular basis. But when I have gone to it, I'm always really it's compelling. Some of it's done really well. Some of it is kind of useless, but they are doing an interesting job. And I wonder, kind of individually, what you all sort of think of it. Have you used it? What are your thoughts? What was the first thing that crossed your mind when you looked at it and saw it? What do you make of it? You can start with Ben and go down the line.
I'm starting to feel it more in the culture. You hear people talk about it more, and there are these content providers that are creating content exclusively for it and cleaning it up a little bit from just being, married people cheating on their significant others. Like, that's what I feel like Snapchat started out as, and it's just bad news. And just get rid of it, and then it turned into something that was a little bit more cleaned up. You saw the same thing happen with YouTube and a lot of these platforms. Then they come out, it's just a lot of white noise, and then it kind of streamlines into something. So if it can provide information to people in a short, concise way, that's really cool. But at the same time, it's also kind of, adding to this dumbing down effect, right, where people don't really want to know a lot about a subject matter. They just want to know enough where they can sound smart at the bar or at a cocktail party or something. So I mean, I like something a little bit more substantive, but maybe that's a generational thing. I don't know, but it definitely is becoming a player that is right there alongside of Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all that.
I think, like anybody born in the 70s, I'm pretty confused by Snapchat. When I first logged into it, I just could not pick up the UI. But after I got around and really got to play with it, I think the content on there is beautiful. It's so visually compelling, and it's a really good experience, actually. And I can see what Matthew was saying about it being addictive. You get on there and you're like, this is great. And the future, I mean, the monetization, who knows? But when you think of Snapchat, people are in there every day, multiple times a day. So you can see why it would be a valuable piece of real estate to get into, to have your brand, your content in front of people in that spot, because people are on Snapchat all the time. So I was very impressed. I thought it was a really good experience.
And Jamie mentioned this earlier. That's where people are. I mean, that's right when I've heard about Snapchat when my cousin told me about it, who was 16. I got it just to try it out and thought it was the weirdest thing I'd ever used. But you know what? Like, that's where those damn kids are. We have to be there. I actually think that the ESPN, working with the publishers, is a really cool step for us. I actually think that the ESPN publisher app in there is one of my favorite things ESPN does. And that's not a knock on ESPN. It's just a cool thing. It's something that I actually use and can go through and can kind of digest everything that's happening in sports that day in about 25 seconds with video. It's just a neat feature, and I hope it expands. So folks like us down the pecking list can get a shot at it.
Yeah, it was with great envy that I saw ESPN in the Discover launch as a launch partner. But on the other hand, like maybe it's not so bad that we're not in there. It might not work out for them. Well, it's good that we can see it's early days. It remains to be seen whether Snapchat users, as many of them as there may be, care about getting information and entertainment from brands like ESPN and Sporting News and USA Today Sports and on down the line. That's going to be a big thing that we're going to discover in 2015.
So I guess just lastly, really quick, because we only have a few more minutes, but I always like to kind of delve into some advice. Talk to young journalism students, about kind of what they should be thinking about in terms of mobile technology and how it plays to them. As they're getting ready to graduate, they're a lot of focused on the reporting and the writing and the content production, but it helps to kind of know where things are going and maybe what they should be thinking about. So if anybody has anything to add, just sort of suggestions on what maybe people should be thinking about, go for it.
My quick suggestion would be just to remain being a fan of, especially with sports. You see a lot of traditional media guys who hang out in the locker room and cover the games, and they say, boy, I don't want to be here tonight. And it's like, really? You're at Dodger Stadium, dude, and the sun's setting over the palm trees. Like, this is a pretty sweet gig. Like, if you start to lose sight of that, then what are you doing? I've covered film for a long time. I've covered sports for a long time. I'm still as excited to go watch a game as when I was a kid. So you have to keep that fandom in whatever it is you do. And I just want to thank J. Crew for sponsoring this shoot. I feel like all of us are wearing J. Crew today, so shout out to
I would say real quickly, product. What we're talking about with content, when we're talking about that, we're talking about product, we're talking about UI, we're talking about UX. Getting really good at that, that's the type of person that I would want to have working here this year, next year, until we stop using mobile devices.
Jane?
Yeah, calling back to something I said earlier, for content producers or journalists or whoever's publishing things that are going to end up on phones, remember to look at it on the phone. Like, that's how the majority of people are going to see what it is you're doing, whether it's on camera or the written word or your illustrations, photos, whatever. Look at it on the small screen and make sure that experience is really, really sharp versus just publishing on your desktop. It looks good there and accepting that as a great experience across the board.
And I'll just say, in addition to covering sports and knowing your beat and the journalistic aspect, it's really important to stay on top of how people are consuming your content and knowing what jobs you're doing for readers. And if you really have a good handle on that and you can master that, then you're miles ahead of the game.
It's great. Well, listen, guys, thank you so much. Ben, Jamie, Joe, John, I appreciate it. Again, remember, SportsConf goes on the rest of the day until 6 o'clock, so check out all the panels. It's good stuff. Look forward to it again next year. This is always a great event, so thanks to everybody, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Go Knicks.